In a naval hangar where silence feels like discipline, a janitor mopping floors keeps his eyes down as officers pass. His faded name tag and worn uniform make him invisible. Until today. When a decorated admiral approaches to mock him in front of new recruits, something shifts in the old man's posture. The moment he sets aside his mop and straightens his back, senior officers recognize what the admiral doesn't. The partial trident tattoo belongs to a ghost the military has been whispering about for 15 years. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story speaks to you, consider subscribing. Some legends never die. They just wait for the right moment to return. Naval Base. Hartford gleamed in the crisp morning light, a monument to military precision and discipline. Massive hangars line the waterfront like sentinels, their steel surfaces reflecting the sun's rays. Personnel moved with purpose across the grounds, uniforms pristine, postures erect. Everything and everyone had a place, a purpose, a designation. Everything except for Mercer Thorne. Mercer worked his mop across the hangar floor in long, methodical strokes. 62 years had etched deep lines into his face, but his hands remained steady as they guided the mop in perfect parallel lines. His faded janitor's uniform hung loosely on his frame, the name badge worn beyond recognition. He kept his eyes downcast as officers passed, their polished shoes crossing his freshly cleaned sections without acknowledgement. In 12 years of maintaining these floors, Mercer had perfected the art of invisibility. He'd become as much a fixture as the support beams overhead, present but unseen. That's what made the subtle straightening of his shoulders when no one was looking all the more noticeable, if anyone had bothered to observe. But no one did, except for a pair of watchful eyes from across the hangar. Half a mile away in the officers' quarters, Admiral Westlake Harding adjusted the impressive array of medals adorning his dress blues. At 55, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to respect, to power, to being the most important person in any room. The mirror reflected an imposing figure, square jaw, silver-streaked hair cropped short, eyes that could cut through excuses like a laser. On his desk sat a framed photograph, a younger Harding receiving commendations for Operation Blackwater Descent. His expression solemn but satisfied, as a 4-star general pinned medals to his chest. 15 years had passed since that day, and the Admiral's star had continued to rise. An aide knocked softly before entering, a tablet in hand. Lieutenant Voss, eager and efficient, stood at attention. "The inspection schedule is confirmed, sir. The new SEAL candidates will be assembled in Hangar 3 at 0900. Harding nodded, making a final adjustment to his uniform. "Excellent. Make sure the press attaché is prepared. I want photographs with the candidates." "For the anniversary publication." "Yes, sir. And the, anniversary celebration preparations are underway. The memorial wall has been updated per your specifications." Something flashed across Harding's face, too quick to identify. Pride, perhaps. Or something darker. "Very good, Lieutenant. That will be all." After Voss departed, Harding lingered at his desk, fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. 15 years, he murmured to himself, then squared his shoulders and headed for the door. Back in Hangar 3, Mercer continued his work. The massive space would soon fill with naval personnel and SEAL candidates, but for now, it belonged to him and the hollow echo of his mop against the concrete floor. His routine was interrupted by the arrival of Ensign Piper Calloway, a steaming cup in her hand. "Morning, Mr. Thorne," she said, setting the coffee on a nearby workbench. Unlike most officers, she made eye contact, though Mercer seldom returned it. "Ma'am," he responded, his voice graveled from disuse. "They're bringing in the new SEAL candidates today. Place is going to be a zoo." She hesitated, seeming to want more conversation, but Mercer's attention remained fixed on his task. After an awkward moment, she nodded. "Well, enjoy the coffee." As she walked away, Mercer's eyes briefly followed her. Ensign Calloway was an anomaly, one of the few who seemed to see through his invisibility. It made her dangerous in a way, but also a reminder of something he'd long forgotten. The coffee sat untouched as Mercer continued working. 3 officers strode through, engaged in animated conversation, their boots tracking mud across his clean floor. They passed without a glance in his direction. Mercer simply adjusted his path to re-clean the soiled area. At the security checkpoint, The daily ritual played out with mechanical precision. The guard, Specialist Hernandez, barely looked up from his computer as Mercer presented his ID badge. "Name and purpose," Hernandez intoned. "Mercer Thorne, janitorial." Hernandez scanned the badge, though he'd done so every weekday for years. "Proceed." This was Mercer's existence, a constant loop of verification that he belonged in spaces where he was simultaneously required and invisible. In the mess hall, Mercer sat alone at a corner table, methodically consuming his meal while keeping his back to the wall and his eyes on the entrance. Nearby, a group of junior officers huddled over their trays, voices lowered but still audible to someone trained to hear. "Did you ever hear about Ghost Reaper?" one asked, earning excited murmurs. "That's classified stuff, man," another responded, glancing around. "My CO was in Jakarta during that mess, said Ghost Reaper went into places even Delta wouldn't touch. I heard his entire team was wiped out in Colombia, but he still completed the mission. No, it was Yemen, or maybe Sudan. The records are all black-lined anyway." A third officer leaned in. "My uncle worked intelligence. Back then, said Ghost Reaper wasn't just a SEAL, he was something else. Something they created for missions that officially never happened." Mercer's hand paused imperceptibly as he raised his fork. When his tray slipped from his grip and clattered to the floor, the conversation halted abruptly. All eyes turned to the old janitor on his knees, carefully gathering scattered food. No one moved to help. After cleaning his mess, Mercer carried his tray to the disposal area, feeling the officer's eyes on his back. By the time he turned around, they had resumed their conversation, but the topic had changed to weekend plans. As morning shifted to afternoon, Hangar 3 began to fill. Junior officers arranged chairs in perfect rows. Technicians checked the sound system. Security personnel conducted sweeps. And Mercer continued his work, now focusing on the massive windows that lined the upper portion of the hangar walls. From his elevated position on the cleaning lift, he could observe the entire space without drawing attention. That's when he noticed Commander Farron Devereaux enter. Unlike the other officers, Devereaux moved with a different kind of awareness, his eyes systematically scanning not just the obvious focal points, but the periphery. When his gaze landed on Mercer, it lingered. There was no nod, no acknowledgement, just a moment of focused attention before the commander moved on to inspect the podium setup. Mercer lowered his platform and busied himself with preparing his cleaning supplies, positioning himself near the back of the hangar as personnel began to file in. The new SEAL candidates entered as a group, distinguishable by their unified movements and alert postures. They took their seats in the front rows, ramrod straight, while senior officers and base personnel filled in behind them. Admiral Harding arrived last, flanked by his aides and several high-ranking visitors from Naval Intelligence. His entrance created a ripple effect, conversations dying as he passed, personnel straightening to attention. He acknowledged select individuals with brief nods, his path to the podium, a carefully choreographed demonstration of authority. As the Admiral began his address, Mercer positioned himself along the back wall, mop in hand, continuing to work while maintaining a respectful distance. The speech followed familiar rhythms, celebrating naval tradition, SEAL legacy, and the exceptional few who earned the right to attempt the training program. "The trident you aspire to earn," Harding declared, his voice resonating through the hangar, "represents more than qualification. It represents sacrifice, honor, and commitment beyond what ordinary men can comprehend." Mercer's sleeve rode up slightly as he extended his mop beneath a row of chairs, revealing a partial tattoo on his forearm. From most angles, it was just an indistinct mark, but from where Admiral Harding stood, the partial outline of a trident became momentarily visible. The Admiral's speech faltered for a fraction of a second, his eyes narrowing as they fixed on Mercer's arm. Then, with practiced ease, he recovered and continued. But something had changed. His posture became more rigid, his gestures more pronounced, as if performing with greater intensity. "Today you join a tradition of warriors who operate in the shadows," Harding continued, his gaze periodically drifting to where Mercer worked. "Men who accomplish the impossible without recognition or acclaim." As the speech concluded to applause, Harding didn't immediately leave the podium. Instead, he stepped down and began moving through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging brief words with officers. His path, seemingly casual, brought him steadily toward the back of the hangar. Mercer continued working, apparently oblivious to the Admiral's approach. When Harding finally stood before him, he kept his eyes on the floor, mop moving in unwavering rhythm. "Keeping our floors shipshape, are we?" Harding's voice carried just enough to draw attention from nearby personnel. Mercer nodded without looking up. "Yes, sir." "I don't think I've seen you look an officer in the eye once in. How long have you been here?" The question hung in the air, a challenge disguised as casual inquiry. 12 years, sir," Mercer responded, his voice low but clear. 12 years? Harding repeated, looking around at the gathering audience of officers and candidates. "Longer than most of our decorated officers." Laughter rippled through the junior ranks, though some of the senior officers remained stone-faced. Harding stepped closer, invading Mercer's space, forcing him to pause his work. "You know, there's something about you that seems familiar." His eyes dropped to Mercer's forearm, where the partial tattoo had been visible. "Were you military before this illustrious janitorial career?" "Yes, sir." The answer was flat, emotionless. "Let me guess." Harding's tone sharpened, becoming performative for his growing audience. "Army? No, too skinny for a grunt. Navy, perhaps?" He paused, eyes narrowing. "I see that mark on your arm. Were you a wannabe frogman, old-timer? What did they call you, swab the deck?" More laughter erupted, louder now, though notably not from the senior officers or SEAL instructors. Commander Devereaux had moved closer, his expression carefully neutral as he observed the interaction. Mercer's knuckles whitened around the mop handle, the only visible sign of tension in his otherwise impassive demeanor. For a moment, the hangar seemed to hold its breath, suspended between Harding's mocking smile and Mercer's downturned face. Then, slowly, Mercer raised his head. For a fraction of a second, his eyes met the Admiral's, direct and unflinching. Something passed between them, a flash of recognition that drained the humor from Harding's expression. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, Mercer's gaze dropping back to the floor. But the damage was done. Harding took a half step, backward, his next words dying unspoken. He cleared his throat, composing himself with visible effort. "Carry on," he managed, before turning abruptly to address a nearby officer with forced joviality. As the crowd dispersed, Commander Devereaux's gaze remained fixed on Mercer, who had resumed his mopping as if nothing had happened. When everyone's attention had shifted away from the janitor, Devereaux quietly slipped out a side door, pulling out a secure phone as he moved with purpose across the base grounds. The rest of the afternoon passed with a semblance of normalcy. Mercer completed his rounds, cleaning areas in a predetermined sequence that kept him moving throughout the base. If he was aware of the increased attention from certain quarters, he gave no indication. His movements remained economical, his expression neutral, his interactions minimal. As evening approached, Mercer stored his equipment in the maintenance closet and prepared to clock out. The corridor outside the security office was empty except for Ensign Calloway, who appeared to be waiting. "Mr. Thorne," she called, falling into step beside him. "I wanted to apologize for what happened in the hangar today. The Admiral was out of line." Mercer kept walking. "No need, ma'am." Still, it wasn't right. She hesitated, then pressed on. "Some of the officers were talking afterward, about your tattoo." That earned her a sideways glance. "People talk, ma'am. They said only SEALs get that mark, that you must have washed out of training." When Mercer didn't respond, she continued. "But that doesn't make sense, because Bud S. washouts don't get the trident, so either you earned it or I'm a fraud with an inappropriate tattoo," Mercer finished for her, his voice neutral. Calloway studied him. "Is that what you are, Mr. Thorne? A fraud?" Mercer stopped walking, turned to face her fully for the first time. Something in his eyes made her take an involuntary step back. "What I am, Ensign, is a man trying to finish his shift. Now, if you'll excuse me." He continued toward the exit, leaving Calloway staring after him, her expression troubled. As he passed through security, Specialist Hernandez barely looked up from his station. "Have a good evening, Thorne." Outside, twilight had settled over the base. Mercer walked toward the civilian parking area, his pace unhurried, his posture once again slightly stooped, eyes downcast. Anyone watching would see just another aging maintenance worker heading home after a long day. No one noticed the dark sedan parked across from the lot, or the man inside tracking Mercer's progress. No one saw Commander Devereaux lift a radio to his lips as Mercer reached his battered pickup truck. No one heard his words, spoken quietly but with unmistakable urgency. Phantom 6, this is oversight. Visual confirmation obtained. Subject matches ghost profile. Repeat. Ghost profile confirmed. Awaiting instructions. The response came immediately, crackling through the secure channel. Maintain surveillance only. No contact. Protocol 17 is now active. Repeat. Protocol 17 is active. Devereaux lowered the radio, watching as Mercer's truck pulled away from the base. His expression was unreadable, a complex mixture of emotions carefully controlled. Only when the taillights had disappeared from view did he allow himself a single word, spoken to the empty car. Finally, in his modest apartment 10 miles from the base, Mercer went through the motions of his evening routine. Dinner was simple and consumed standing at his kitchen counter. The television remained off. The only sound came from a small radio tuned to a classical music station, the volume barely audible. After eating, he moved to a Spartan living room containing a single armchair, a side table, and a locked cabinet. From his pocket, he removed a key and opened the cabinet, revealing not weapons or military memorabilia, but a collection of leather-bound journals. He selected one, returned to the chair, and began to read, pages filled with his own handwriting, a chronicle spanning years. The phone on the side table rang, startling in the quiet apartment. Mercer eyed it warily, as if it were a snake that had suddenly appeared in his home. It rang 3 times before he finally answered, his voice guarded. Yes? The voice on the other end was female, professional. Mr. Thorne, this is Commander Ellis from Naval Intelligence. There's been a security incident at the base involving historical records. Your presence is requested tomorrow morning at 0700 for a routine interview. Mercer's expression didn't change. What records? Operation Blackwater Descent. I understand you were employed at the base during that time period. This is purely procedural, Mr. Thorne. A long silence followed, broken only when Ellis prompted. Mr. Thorne, are you still there? I'll be there, he finally responded, then hung up without waiting for acknowledgement. Mercer sat motionless for several minutes, the journal open but forgotten in his lap. Then, with deliberate movements, he returned it to the cabinet, locked it, and moved to a small closet in the hallway. From the back, behind hanging clothes, he retrieved a battered metal lockbox. The combination came to his fingers automatically, though he hadn't opened it in years. Inside lay a collection of items that told a different story than the life of a base janitor. A combat knife with a worn handle, a set of dog tags that didn't bear the name Mercer Thorne, a faded photograph of 6 men in combat gear, with faces partially obscured by shadow, and a folded piece of paper that had yellowed with age. Mercer unfolded the paper carefully, revealing a handwritten letter. He read it silently, his expression remaining unchanged, though something shifted behind his eyes with each line. When he finished, he refolded it along well-worn creases and returned everything to the box except the dog tags, which he slipped into his pocket. In the bathroom, Mercer studied his reflection in the mirror, seeing not the aging janitor the world knew, but something else entirely, something buried beneath years of careful obscurity. He removed his shirt, revealing a torso mapped with scars and a complete tattoo that the partial glimpse on his forearm had only hinted at. A trident, anchor, and eagle, the seal insignia inked over his heart. Below it, a list of names, 7 in total, with all but one bearing small crosses beside them. Mercer touched the names gently, a ritual of remembrance, before putting his shirt back on. He returned to the living room, switched off the radio, and settled into his chair in the darkness. He would not sleep tonight. Tomorrow would require all his focus, all his training. Tomorrow, the ghost would have to decide whether to remain in the shadows or step into the light. Commander Devereaux sat in his office on base, illuminated only by the glow of his computer screen. Files labeled Classified Blackwater Descent displayed redacted documents with more black lines than visible text. Beside the computer lay a personnel file with Mercer's janitorial ID photo, paper-clipped to employment records dating back 12 years. A knock at his door preceded the entrance of a woman in civilian clothes, though her bearing marked her immediately as military. "Commander," she greeted him. "Commander Ellis," he returned, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for coming. Your message said it was urgent, something about Protocol 17. Devereaux nodded. "It's been activated, after 15 years. Ellis's composure slipped momentarily. You found him? You're sure? Instead of answering directly, Devereaux turned his computer screen toward her, displaying side-by-side photographs. A younger man in SEAL combat gear, face partially obscured by tactical gear, but eyes unmistakable, and a freeze frame from base security footage showing Mercer looking directly at the camera during a rare moment of eye contact. Ghost Reaper, Devereaux said quietly. He's been here all along, hiding in plain sight. Does Admiral Harding know? He suspects something. He made a point of confronting him today, though I don't think he made the full connection. Not yet. Ellis leaned back in her chair, processing. Why now? After 15 years, why surface? The anniversary ceremony, Devereaux replied. Harding's been pushing for expanded recognition of his role in Blackwater. New commemorative plaques, press coverage, the works. And Ghost doesn't want his operation rewritten, Ellis concluded. What's our play? Devereaux closed the laptop. I've scheduled him for an interview tomorrow morning. Protocol 17 specifies verification before any action. He hesitated. There's more. Lieutenant Riker Okafor is among the new SEAL instructors. Ellis's eyes widened. Elias Okafor's son? Does he know? I don't think so, but Ghost will recognize the name. This could get complicated, Ellis sighed. If Harding realizes who he mocked today in front of the entire base, then we'd better work fast, Devereaux finished. One way or another, Ghost Reaper is back from the dead, and I don't think he came back just to mop floors. As dawn broke over Naval Base Harford, Mercer Thorne's pickup truck passed through the main gate. He wore his usual janitor's uniform, carried his usual ID, presented his usual impassive expression to the gate guard, but the dog tags from his lockbox now hung around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt, and his eyes, though still downcast, carried a focus that hadn't been there in years. This time, when Specialist Hernandez asked for his name and purpose, Mercer looked him directly in the eye and responded with quiet certainty. Mercer Thorne, here for a reckoning. If you've ever met someone who carried themselves with quiet dignity despite being overlooked, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you witnessed a moment when someone's true value was suddenly recognized? Consider subscribing if these stories of hidden strength resonate with you. Mercer Thorne sat in a sterile interview room, deep within the Naval Intelligence Wing, a space designed to make occupants uncomfortable. The walls were blank, the lighting harsh, the single window mirrored. He maintained perfect stillness in his chair, hands flat on the table, eyes focused on the door. Despite his janitor's uniform, his posture betrayed military bearing that no amount of stooping could fully conceal. The door opened precisely at 0700. Commander Ellis entered first, followed by Commander Devereaux. Both carried tablets and folders, but no coffee, a deliberate choice. This wasn't meant to be comfortable. Mr. Thorne, Ellis began, taking a seat across from him. Thank you for coming in this morning. Mercer nodded once, saying nothing. As I mentioned on the phone, we're conducting interviews regarding Operation Blackwater Descent ahead of the 15th anniversary commemorations. Ellis placed a folder on the table, but didn't open it. Standard procedure for anyone employed at the base during that time period. I wasn't employed here then, Mercer stated flatly. Ellis consulted her tablet. Our records indicate your employment began 11 years and 8 months ago. Operation Blackwater occurred 15 years ago. That's correct? Yes. Then why? Devereaux interjected, speaking for the first time. Did you tell Admiral Harding yesterday that you've been here 12 years? Mercer's eyes shifted to Devereaux, evaluating. People round up. Do they? Devereaux opened his folder, sliding a document across the table. This is your original employment application. The date is clearly marked, February 17th, 12 years ago. Yet your employee file shows a start date of April 3rd, 4 months later. Mercer glanced at the document without touching it. Paperwork gets delayed. Indeed. Ellis's tone remained neutral, especially when background checks require additional verification. The room fell silent. Both commanders watched Mercer, who returned their gaze impassively. Mr. Thorne, Ellis finally continued, are you aware of the significance of Protocol 17? A muscle twitched in Mercer's jaw, almost imperceptible. Should I be? Devereaux leaned forward. It's activated when a ghost returns from the dead. Another silence, heavier this time. Mercer remained still, but something had changed in his eyes, a sharpening, a focusing. "We're not here about janitorial records," Ellis said quietly. "We're here because of what happened in the hangar yesterday." "The Admiral has always been particular about clean floors," Mercer replied, a hint of something dangerous entering his voice. Devereaux placed another document on the table. "This is a partially redacted after-action report from Operation Blackwater Descent. Would you care to fill in some of the blacked-out sections for us, Commander Thorne? Or do you prefer Ghost Reaper?" The name hung in the air between them, a verbal grenade with its pin removed. Mercer studied both officers for a long moment before responding. "That mission is still classified." "Not for much longer," Ellis countered. "Admiral Harding has been pushing for a formal declassification ahead of the anniversary celebration. He's planning quite the spectacle to commemorate his heroic leadership during the extraction." There was no extraction. The words escaped Mercer like a bullet, precise and lethal. Ellis and Devereaux exchanged glances. "Perhaps," Devereaux suggested carefully, "you could explain what actually happened." Mercer's hand moved to his collar, withdrawing the dog tags that had remained hidden until now. He placed them on the table beside the documents. The name stamped into the metal wasn't Mercer Thorne. "Commander James Harlow," Ellis read aloud, "officially listed as killed in action, November 17th, 15 years ago." She looked up. "Yet, here you sit." "Here I sit," Mercer agreed, his voice hollow. "Why come back as a janitor?" Devereaux asked. "Of all the covers you could have chosen, why this one?" Mercer reclaimed his tags, slipping them back beneath his shirt. "The best surveillance position in any room is the one nobody looks at." Ellis nodded slowly. "You've been watching Admiral Harding all these years." "I've been watching a lot of things." "And now," Devereaux pressed, "why reveal yourself after 15 years of hiding in plain sight?" Mercer stood abruptly, causing both commanders to tense, but he merely walked to the mirrored window, studying his reflection. "Because Harding is rewriting history, memorializing a lie, and the dead deserve better." "Which dead?" Ellis asked quietly. "The official record shows 3 casualties during Operation Blackwater." 7, Mercer corrected without turning. 4 are still listed as missing in action. "Your team," Devereaux stated. Mercer finally turned from the window. "My family." The word landed with unexpected weight, transforming the sterile room. For a moment, neither Ellis nor Devereaux spoke, perhaps recognizing that they'd crossed a threshold from procedural questioning into something more profound. "We need to know what happened," Ellis finally said. "The real operation, not Harding's version." "Why?" Mercer's question was simple but pointed. Devereaux closed his folder. "Because for 15 years, naval intelligence has been investigating discrepancies in the Blackwater files. Because Admiral Harding's meteoric rise has left questions in its wake. Because Protocol 17 was established specifically for this scenario, Commander Harlow, by people who suspected you weren't really dead. And because," Ellis added, "Lieutenant Riker Okafor deserves to know what happened to his father." Mercer's composure slipped for an instant, genuine surprise registering before he controlled it. "Elias had a son?" "Who grew up believing his father died because extraction was impossible," Devereaux confirmed. "Who joined the Navy to honor that sacrifice." Mercer returned to his chair, the weight of this revelation evident in his movements. "Extraction wasn't impossible," he said quietly. "It was denied." Across the base in the main reception hall, Admiral Westlake Harding supervised preparations for the upcoming commemoration ceremony. A large banner bearing the Operation Blackwater Descent insignia hung above a newly constructed memorial wall. Workers carefully installed bronze plaques listing names of participants and casualties, all under Harding's exacting scrutiny. "The lighting is wrong," he snapped at a technician adjusting spotlights. "The center plaque needs to be highlighted." That particular plaque, larger than the others, detailed Harding's leadership during the operation, complete with a younger photograph of him in combat gear. His aide, Lieutenant Voss, approached cautiously. "Sir, the media liaison requests confirmation on your availability for interviews tomorrow." "Confirm all of them," Harding replied, still focused on the memorial wall. "CNN, Fox, all the military journals. This is going to put Blackwater in the history books where it belongs." "Yes, sir." Voss hesitated. There's also a request from Commander Ellis for access to your personal files from the operation, for the official anniversary documentation. Harding turned sharply. Denied. Those files remain classified under my authority. Ellis needs to stay in her lane. Of course, sir. I'll inform her. Voss started to withdraw, but stopped when Harding spoke again. That janitor from yesterday, the Admiral said, his tone deceptively casual. What was his name? Thorne, sir. Mercer Thorne. Run a complete background check. I want to know everything about him. Voss looked surprised. The janitor, sir? Harding's expression darkened. Just do it, Lieutenant. Immediately. As Voss hurried away, Harding turned back to the memorial wall, his reflection fragmented across the polished bronze. Plaques. Something in his expression had changed, a certainty replaced by the faintest hint of concern. In the interview room, Mercer Harlow, known for 12 years as Mercer Thorne, began to speak. His voice remained level, but each word carried the weight of long-buried truth. Blackwater was supposed to be an intelligence-gathering operation. 6-man team, deep infiltration of insurgent territory along the Sudan-Ethiopia border. Our target was a warlord named Nazir, who was allegedly receiving American weapons through black market channels. Ellis made notes while Devereaux listened intently, neither interrupting. 3 days in, we discovered it wasn't just weapons. There were American military advisors training Nazir's forces. Advisors operating under non-official cover, but clearly sanctioned by someone high up the chain. Mercer's eyes grew distant with memory. We documented everything, prepared to extract, and that's when it went sideways. How so? Ellis prompted when he paused. Our extraction team was ambushed en route to the pickup point. Someone knew exactly where they'd be. Meanwhile, our position was compromised. We had to fight our way out, taking heavy casualties. His hand unconsciously moved to his side, where an old wound lay hidden beneath his uniform. We called for emergency extraction. That call went to then Captain Harding at Forward Command. And he denied it, Devereaux stated. He did more than deny it, Mercer corrected. He ordered us to destroy all intelligence gathered and terminate the mission. When I pressed for extraction, citing wounded team members, he claimed the area was too hot for another attempt. Was it? Ellis asked. No. We had a viable LZ 10 clicks east, but Harding insisted no assets were available. Mercer's eyes hardened. 8 hours later, we intercepted chatter about American helicopters extracting personnel from a location 5 clicks from our position. Harding had assets. He just wasn't sending them for us. Why? Devereaux asked the obvious question. Because the advisors we documented working with Nazir were part of a black operation. Harding was running off the books, Operation Kingmaker. They were arming both sides of a regional conflict to position an American-friendly replacement when Nazir eventually fell. Mercer's voice remained steady, but his hands had balled into fists. Our intelligence would have exposed the whole operation, along with everyone involved. Ellis looked up from her notes. So, what did you do? What SEALs do? We adapted. I split the team, sending Ramirez and Okafor with our wounded toward the suspected American extraction point, while the rest of us created a diversion. Mercer's gaze turned inward again, seeing events from 15 years ago. The diversion worked too well. We drew heavy fire, got separated. By the time I reached the extraction point, there was an American helicopter departing. With Ramirez and Okafor? Devereaux asked. With Okafor on a stretcher. No sign of Ramirez or our other wounded. The helicopter was already taking fire, couldn't wait. Mercer paused, the memory clearly painful. I spent the next 72 hours searching for my men. Found 2 bodies, Watson and Chen, executed, not killed in combat. The others, including Ramirez, were just gone. And the intelligence you gathered? Ellis asked. I had backup files, memory cards sewn into my gear. Standard protocol for missions that sensitive. Devereaux leaned forward. You brought that intelligence back. Mercer nodded once. I made it to an emergency extraction point 3 days later, half dead from blood loss and dehydration. The pickup team was shocked. They'd been told our entire unit was lost. His expression turned grim. By the time I reached debrief, the narrative was already established. Captain Harding had heroically attempted extraction under impossible conditions. The mission was classified a necessary failure, with all hands presumed dead. Except you weren't dead, Ellis noted. No, but I was inconvenient. My debriefing was handled by two officers I'd never met. My intelligence was confiscated. I was placed in medical isolation for evaluation while my wounds healed. Mercer's mouth twisted in a bitter, almost smile. 3 weeks later, I was informed that Commander James Harlow had been officially declared killed in action. A grave exists at Arlington with my name on it. My service was honored posthumously, and Captain Harding received his first star for his courageous leadership during a tragic operation. The room fell silent again as Ellis and Devereaux absorbed this information. "The memory cards," Devereaux finally said. "What happened to them?" "They disappeared during my medical isolation, along with my personal effects, mission log, and anything else that contradicted the official narrative." Ellis set down her tablet. "So, you let them believe you were dead. Then what?" "I became a ghost," Mercer replied simply. "Spent 2 years gathering information, tracking the other players in Kingmaker. When I had enough, I created a new identity and came here, where I could watch Harding up close while I rebuilt the evidence that had been taken from me." "For 12 years?" Devereaux sounded incredulous. "That's an extraordinarily long surveillance operation." "The kind of operation only a dead man has time for," Mercer countered. "The evidence was buried deep. The witnesses scattered or silenced. I needed access, patience, and invisibility." He gestured to his janitor's uniform. "This provided all three." Ellis studied him carefully. "And now? What triggered your decision to reveal yourself after all this time?" "The anniversary celebration. Harding's been pushing to declassify selected parts of the operation, cementing his version as historical fact." Mercer's eyes hardened. "My men deserve better than to have their deaths memorialized as a tragic accident when it was actually deliberate. Abandonment." "You realize the implications of what you're saying," Devereaux stated. "You're accusing an admiral of the United States Navy of dereliction of duty, falsifying records, and effectively causing the deaths of American Special Forces operators." "I'm not accusing," Mercer corrected. "I'm stating facts, and I have proof." Both commanders straightened at this. "What proof?" Ellis asked. Mercer met her gaze directly. "Proof I'll only share once I understand whose side you're on. Protocol 17 could be designed to silence me permanently rather than expose the truth. I've been betrayed by the chain of command before." Before either could respond, a sharp knock at the door preceded Lieutenant Voss's hurried entrance. "Commanders," he began, then stopped abruptly upon seeing Mercer. "I apologize for the interruption, but Admiral Harding requires your immediate presence. Both of you." Ellis frowned. "We're in the middle of a classified interview, Lieutenant." "The Admiral was explicit, ma'am. Immediate means now. He's in the Memorial Hall with the Intelligence Director." Ellis and Devereaux exchanged concerned glances. "Wait here, Mr. Thorne," Ellis instructed as they rose. "This interview is not concluded." After they left, Mercer remained seated, eyes fixed on the door, body perfectly still, except for the rhythmic tapping of one finger against the table, like a timer counting down. In the Memorial Hall, Admiral Harding stood with Director Carmichael, a steel-haired woman whose civilian clothes belied her 30 years in naval intelligence. They turned as Ellis and Devereaux entered, Harding's expression thunderous, Carmichael's unreadable. "Would either of you," Harding began without preamble, "care to explain why you've activated Protocol 17 without authorization?" Ellis maintained her composure. "Protocol 17 was activated per established guidelines, Admiral. The verification threshold was met." "Verification of what, exactly?" Harding demanded. "The presence of Ghost Reaper, sir," Devereaux answered steadily. "We have confirmed that Mercer Thorne is Commander James Harlow." The name landed like a physical blow. Harding's face flushed, then paled. "Harlow died in Operation Blackwater. His body was never recovered, but his death was confirmed." "By whom, sir?" Ellis asked, her tone professionally neutral. Harding ignored the question, turning to Director Carmichael. "This is precisely the kind of waste of resources I warned about. Ghost Reaper was a call sign, nothing more. These officers are chasing conspiracy theories." "Actually, Admiral," Carmichael interjected, her voice calm but authoritative. "Protocol 17 was established at the highest levels specifically for this contingency. Commander Ellis acted appropriately in activating it." "What contingency?" Harding's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "The reappearance of a dead man?" The The potential re-emergence of a deep-cover operative with critical intelligence, Carmichael corrected. She turned to Ellis and Devereaux. Your preliminary findings? Troubling, Director, Ellis responded. Commander Harlow's account of Operation Blackwater differs substantially from the official record. He alleges deliberate abandonment of his team after they uncovered evidence of unauthorized American involvement with regional warlords. Harding's face contorted. This is absurd. You're taking the word of a janitor claiming to be a dead seal over the established record? We're investigating all claims thoroughly, sir, Devereaux stated, as Protocol 17 requires. Where is he now? Carmichael asked. In interview room 3, Ellis answered. Under standard observation. Carmichael nodded. I want to speak with him personally. This is outrageous, Harding sputtered. I was there. I commanded that operation. These allegations are not only false but treasonous. Whoever this man is, he's not James Harlow. Then you should have nothing to worry about from a complete investigation, Carmichael replied coolly. Let's continue this discussion after I've spoken with him. As they turned to leave, Harding's voice stopped them. This anniversary celebration has been planned for months. The press is already scheduled. Nothing derails that. Am I clear? The implied threat hung in the air, but Carmichael merely nodded once before leading Ellis and Devereaux from the hall. Once they were out of earshot, Carmichael spoke quietly. How solid is your verification? Physical identification, operational knowledge, and behavioral assessment all align, Ellis reported. We're running DNA against archived samples, but preliminary indicators strongly suggest he is indeed Harlow. His claims about the operation? Detailed, consistent, and unfortunately plausible, Devereaux answered. He asserts he has proof, but hasn't shared it yet. Carmichael's pace increased. Let's hear it directly from him. But when they reached interview room 3, they found it empty. The table was clear, the chair where Mercer had sat, pushed neatly into place. No signs of struggle, no indication of how he'd left a secure room with only one visible door. Lock down the base, Carmichael ordered immediately. Full security protocol. Find him. While security teams scrambled to locate the missing man, Ensign Piper Calloway moved purposefully through the base archives, her official ID granting her access to the records department. Unlike the electronic databases that contained redacted versions of classified missions, the physical archives housed original documents, photographs, and materials too sensitive for digital storage. She approached the records clerk with practiced confidence. I need to access the physical artifacts from Operation Blackwater Descent, Director Carmichael's authorization. She presented a document bearing the appropriate signature. The clerk examined it carefully before nodding. Section 117B. Sign here, please. All materials must remain in the secure reading room. Calloway signed and proceeded to the indicated section, locating a sealed container labeled with the operation designation. Inside, she found original photographs, handwritten mission notes, equipment inventories, and a sealed evidence bag containing damaged memory cards. She worked quickly, photographing documents with a specialized camera designed to capture high-resolution images without leaving electronic traces. When she reached a folder containing personnel files, she paused at a photograph of 6 men in combat gear, faces partially obscured but identifiable. Her finger traced over one face, familiar despite the intervening years and changes. Mercer Thorne, James Harlow, looked younger, harder, his eyes carrying a different kind of intensity than the quiet watchfulness she'd observed in the janitor. A noise in the corridor prompted her to work faster. She completed her documentation, carefully returned everything to its exact position, and resealed the container. By the time the door opened to admit another researcher, she was already signing out at the clerk's desk, her expression betraying nothing of her purpose. On the other side of the base, Lieutenant Riker Okafor led a training session with new SEAL candidates, pushing them through grueling physical drills. His attention was divided, however, awareness of unusual security activity around the perimeter drawing his professional interest. When his phone vibrated with a message, he checked it discreetly. The text was brief. Your father's truth. Memorial Hall. 1900 hours. Riker's expression remained neutral, but his next command to the candidates came with increased intensity, channeling sudden emotional turmoil into the training regimen. As shadows lengthened across the base, security teams continued their systematic search for Mercer Thorne. Commander Devereaux coordinated from a mobile command post, receiving regular updates from search teams. "Nothing in the East Quadrant," came one report. "Maintenance tunnels clear," stated another. Devereaux wasn't surprised. A man who had remained invisible for 12 years while in plain sight wouldn't be found unless he wanted to be. Admiral Harding had retreated to his office, doors locked, blinds drawn. Lieutenant Voss waited outside, turning away all visitors per strict instructions. Inside, Harding paced like a caged animal, occasionally pausing to stare at the photograph of Operation Blackwater on his wall. The younger Harding in the image stared back, a reminder of where his ascent had begun, and the compromises made along the way. His secure phone rang, and he snatched it up. "Harding, we have a problem." The voice belonged to General Maxwell, retired officially, but still connected to the remnants of Operation Kingmaker. "Ghost Protocol 17 has been activated." "I'm aware," Harding snapped. "It's being handled." "Is it?" Maxwell's voice carried dangerous doubt. "Because I'm hearing that James Harlow is not only alive, but on your base, discussing Operation Blackwater." "A janitor with delusions of grandeur," Harding dismissed. "He'll be discredited." "This janitor slipped naval intelligence surveillance an hour ago. Does that sound like delusion to you?" Maxwell paused. "If Harlow has the Kingmaker files—" "He doesn't," Harding interrupted. "Those were destroyed years ago." "Then why is he back? Why now?" Maxwell's questions mirrored Harding's own unspoken concerns. "Find him, contain this, or we'll all be answering questions neither of us wants asked." The line went dead, leaving Harding staring at the phone. After a moment, he moved to his desk and unlocked a hidden drawer, removing a secure tablet. His fingers worked quickly, accessing encrypted files, his expression growing increasingly grim as he reviewed contingency protocols established years ago for exactly this scenario. Protocol Terminal. As dusk settled over the base, the memorial hall stood empty. Preparations for tomorrow's ceremony completed. The newly installed plaques gleamed under strategic lighting. Harding's central position, emphasizing his role. The official narrative cast in bronze. History literally set in stone. A shadow moved near the service entrance, resolving into Mercer Thorne, still in his janitor's uniform, but moving now with the fluid precision of his SEAL training. He approached the memorial wall slowly, reading each plaque, his expression hardening with each fabrication, each omission. His hand reached out to touch the names of the fallen, the official 3 rather than his team of 7. His finger traced letters, a ritual like the one he performed with the tattoos over his heart each night. "I thought I might find you here." Mercer didn't turn at Ensign Calloway's voice, though nothing in his posture suggested surprise at her presence. "This isn't a good place for you to be right now, Ensign." Calloway moved to stand beside him, studying the memorial. "I know who you are, Commander Harlow." She produced a small drive from her pocket. "And I have what you've been looking for." Now Mercer did turn, assessing her with new intensity. "How?" "My mother was Lieutenant Grace Calloway. She worked intelligence during Blackwater. She never believed the official report." Piper's voice carried quiet determination. "She spent years collecting evidence before her accident." "There are no accidents in this world, Ensign," Mercer said quietly. "I know." She held his gaze. "That's why I joined. That's why I've been watching you since you caught my attention 3 years ago. The way you move, the way you observe. No janitor cleans a room like they're mapping exits and entries." Mercer accepted the drive, studying it. "Why show yourself now?" "Because of him." She nodded toward the entrance where Lieutenant Riker Okafor stood, watching them with cautious intensity. "He deserves the truth about his father. We all do." As Riker approached, the tension in the room shifted. 3 people connected by an operation 15 years past, converging at last around a memorial built on lies. "Lieutenant Okafor," Mercer acknowledged, his voice carrying new weight. "They're saying you knew my father," Riker replied, stopping a few paces away. "That you were there when he died." "I was there," Mercer confirmed. "But what they told you about how he died, that's not what happened." "Then tell me what did," Riker demanded, emotion breaking through his professional composure. "Tell me why my father never came home." Before Mercer could answer, the doors at the far end of the hall opened. Admiral Harding entered, flanked by security personnel, his face set in grim determination. "That's quite enough, Commander Harlow," he called across the space between them. "Your unauthorized access to this facility ends now." The security team spread out, hands moving to sidearms. Harding stepped forward, his authority radiating from every movement. "You've evaded justice for 15 years. That ends tonight." Mercer turned fully to face him, straightening to his full height, the pretense of the humble janitor falling away completely. When he spoke, his voice carried across the hall with command presence that matched Harding's. "November 17th, North Ridge, radio call, no extraction possible." Harding froze mid-step, color draining from his face. Recognition, fear, and rage warred in his expression as he finally saw the ghost that had haunted the edges of his rise to power. "Who are you?" Mercer's response was simple, devastating in its clarity. "I'm the man you left to die." Ever wondered what you'd do if you had the chance to confront someone who betrayed you? Share your thoughts below. Has someone from your past returned to your life unexpectedly? We'd love to hear your story. Hit subscribe if you want to see more tales of long-buried truths coming to light. The memorial hall fell into silence, the kind that follows a detonation. In the hollow aftermath, even the security personnel seemed frozen, caught between their duty to the Admiral and the unmistakable authority in Mercer Harlow's voice. 15 years of practiced invisibility had vanished in an instant, replaced by the commanding presence of Ghost Reaper. Admiral Harding recovered first, his shock hardening into calculated anger. "Secure this man," he ordered his security team. "He's impersonating a deceased officer." The team hesitated, looking between Harding and the man they had known only as a janitor, now standing with unmistakable military bearing. "Before you follow that order," Commander Devereaux's voice rang out as he entered through a side door with Commander Ellis and Director Carmichael. "You should know that DNA confirmation came back positive 5 minutes ago." He held up a tablet displaying results. "This is Commander James Harlow, officially declared KIA 15 years ago during Operation Blackwater Descent." Harding's face contorted. "This is absurd. I was there. I saw the bodies. Harlow died in the field." "Did you see my body, Admiral?" Mercer asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Or did you just leave me for dead?" Director Carmichael stepped forward. "Stand down, security team. This is now a Section 7 investigation." She turned to Harding. "Admiral, you are hereby relieved of duty pending investigation into operational discrepancies related to Blackwater Descent." "You can't relieve me," Harding sputtered. "I outrank you. This entire charade is based on the word of a man who's been posing as a janitor for over a decade. If he is Harlow, he deserted his post. If he isn't, he's committing fraud." "I didn't desert," Mercer countered. "I was declared dead against my will, while evidence of what really happened was systematically erased." He turned to Director Carmichael. "But not all of it." He held up the small drive Ensign Calloway had given him. "This contains the original Kingmaker files, documenting the unauthorized operation you were running, Admiral. The operation my team wasn't supposed to discover." Harding's composure slipped further. Kingmaker was a sanctioned intelligence gathering mission, nothing more. "It was an illegal arms operation," Mercer stated flatly. "You were supplying weapons to both sides of a regional conflict to engineer a specific outcome. My team discovered it, and you left us to die rather than risk exposure." The security team had lowered their weapons now, all eyes fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. Lieutenant Riker Okafor had moved closer, his face set in stone as he absorbed revelations about his father's death. "You denied extraction," Mercer continued, his voice level despite the emotion behind it. "You reported all hands lost when you knew there were survivors. You built your career on our bodies, Admiral." Harding's eyes darted around the room, calculating before his expression settled into cold resolve. "Director, this man abandoned his post during a critical mission, then created an elaborate deception to avoid consequences. Now, he appears with manufactured evidence and wild accusations. This is clearly an attempt to discredit me ahead of my consideration for Chief of Naval Operations." "DNA doesn't lie, Admiral," Ellis interjected, "and neither does this." She held up a tablet displaying what appeared to be a classified document. "This is the original after-action report from Operation Blackwater, filed by Captain Jenkins, who led the emergency extraction team that recovered Commander Harlow. It directly contradicts your official report. Harding paled visibly. That document is classified. It was declassified 20 minutes ago, Carmichael stated, along with all files related to Blackwater descent. I made the call personally when Commander Harlow's identity was confirmed. This is a violation of protocol, Harding insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. Those files contain sensitive operational details. Yes, they do, Devereaux agreed, including radio transcripts of your direct order to abandon extraction efforts despite viable landing zones and available assets. He turned to Mercer. Commander Harlow's account aligns perfectly with the original documentation. Harding's eyes hardened as he realized his position was deteriorating. He turned to the security team. This is still my base. I am still your commanding officer. Detain these individuals now. The security team looked to Director Carmichael, who shook her head once. Admiral Harding, I am empowered by the Secretary of the Navy to relieve you of command pending investigation. Please surrender your sidearm and credentials. For a moment, it seemed Harding might refuse. His hand drifted toward his hip, where his ceremonial sidearm hung. The security team tensed, hands moving back to their weapons. The hall balanced on a knife's edge of potential violence. Then, from the main entrance, came the sharp sound of boots on polished floor. Everyone turned to see a formation of Navy SEALs entering the hall in perfect unison, dress uniforms immaculate. At their head walked an older man with salt and pepper hair and captain's insignia, his chest bearing decorations that spoke of decades of distinguished service. Captain Jenkins, Mercer breathed, recognition immediate. Jenkins nodded once in acknowledgement before turning his attention to Harding. Admiral, I believe you were about to comply with Director Carmichael's lawful order. The fight seemed to drain from Harding as he recognized the tactical reality. The SEALs formed a perimeter around the hall, their presence a silent statement of where their allegiance lay. With deliberate movements, Harding removed his sidearm and credentials, surrendering them to a waiting security officer. This isn't over, he said quietly, eyes fixed on Mercer. No, Mercer agreed. It's just beginning. As Harding was escorted from the hall, Captain Jenkins approached Mercer, stopping at a respectful distance. Commander Harlow, it's been a long time. 15 years, 3 months, 17 days, Mercer replied precisely. Jenkins nodded. Too long. He extended his hand. Welcome back from the dead, Ghost. Mercer hesitated only briefly before accepting the handshake. Something passed between the two men, a recognition of shared history and hard choices. As they separated, Jenkins turned to Lieutenant Okafor, who had watched the exchange with intense focus. Lieutenant, your father was one of the finest men I ever served with, Jenkins said. Commander Harlow carried him 5 miles with a shattered femur after extraction was denied. He saved your father's life that day, though the injuries eventually proved too severe. He looked back at Mercer. Petty Officer Okafor lived long enough to record his account of what happened. That testimony has been sealed until now. Riker's composure cracked slightly. My father didn't die because extraction was impossible. No, Jenkins confirmed. He died because extraction was deliberately withheld. The truth landed heavily, years of believing a noble but false narrative giving way to a harder reality. Riker turned to Mercer, questions written across his face. Your father was a hero, Mercer told him quietly. He dragged 2 wounded men to the extraction point with his leg shattered. When the helicopter couldn't wait for everyone, he insisted the others go first. He paused, the memory clearly painful. His last words to me were to find the truth and bring it home. The hall fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different, charged with revelation rather than confrontation. Director Carmichael broke it with practiced authority. Commander Ellis, please escort Commander Harlow to medical for evaluation. Commander Devereaux, secure all evidence and prepare initial briefings for the Secretary. She turned to the assembled SEALs. Captain Jenkins, your team will provide security for all involved personnel until further notice. As the hall began to clear, Mercer paused at the memorial wall, studying the plaques that told a false story of Operation Blackwater. With deliberate movements, he removed his janitor's shirt, revealing a black t-shirt beneath and the full trident tattoo on his arm. He draped the shirt over Harding's central plaque, a simple but powerful gesture of rejection. Ensign Calloway approached as he turned away. Commander, there's something else you should know." She glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. "The files my mother collected, they don't just implicate Harding. Operation Kingmaker had authorization from higher up the chain." Mercer nodded, unsurprised. "I know. That's why I waited so long. I needed to be certain of all the players before I moved." "What happens now?" she asked. Mercer looked toward the doorway where Harding had been escorted out. "Now we finish the mission. My team deserves nothing less." The next morning dawned clear and bright over Naval Base Hartford, but the atmosphere was anything but normal. Security checkpoints had doubled. Intelligence officers moved purposefully between buildings. The scheduled anniversary celebration had been officially postponed, though the press had already begun to gather at the main gate, drawn by rumors of a major development. In the main briefing room, a different kind of ceremony was unfolding. Rows of chairs had been arranged to accommodate high-ranking officers, intelligence officials, and selected SEAL team members. At the front of the room stood a simple podium flanked by the American flag and the Navy standard. Admiral Carleton, flown in overnight from Washington to assume temporary command, presided with somber authority. "Today we begin the process of correcting a 15-year-old injustice," he announced to the assembled personnel. "As many of you have now heard, Commander James Harlow, long presumed killed in action during Operation Blackwater Descent, is alive and has been living among us under the identity of Mercer Thorne." A murmur rippled through the room, though most present had already been briefed on the basics. The circumstances surrounding Commander Harlow's return and the discrepancies in the operational record of Blackwater Descent are under full investigation. Former Admiral Harding has been detained pending charges of dereliction of duty, falsifying official records, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Carleton paused, allowing the weight of these statements to settle. But today is not about what went wrong. It is about honoring what went right, and the men who gave everything in service to their country and their teammates. He gestured to the side door, which opened to admit Mercer Harlow, now dressed in a fresh naval uniform with commander's insignia restored to his proper rank. The transformation was remarkable. Without the stooped posture and downcast eyes of his janitor persona, Mercer moved with natural command presence. His bearing that of a warrior returned to his element. The room rose in unison as he approached the podium, a spontaneous show of respect that seemed to momentarily catch him off guard. He nodded once in acknowledgement before taking his position beside Admiral Carleton. "Commander Harlow has agreed to share his first-hand account of Operation Blackwater Descent," Carleton explained. "This will form the foundation of correcting the historical record and properly honoring those lost during the mission." He stepped aside, yielding the podium to Mercer, who surveyed the room with steady eyes before speaking. 15 years ago, 6 men were sent into hostile territory to gather intelligence on weapons smuggling networks. Only one returned. His voice, no longer the quiet murmur of a janitor, filled the room with clear authority. "The official record states that 3 men died in combat and the others were never recovered. That is a lie." Mercer proceeded to lay out the events of Operation Blackwater with precise detail, his account matching the recently declassified documents, but adding the human dimension that only a participant could provide. He spoke of each team member by name, describing their actions, their courage, their final moments with unflinching clarity. When he reached the point where extraction was denied, his voice remained steady, but his hands gripped the podium with visible tension. "Captain Westlake Harding denied extraction despite available assets and viable landing zones," Mercer stated. "He ordered us to destroy our intelligence and terminate the mission. When pressed, he claimed the area was too hot for rescue operations." He looked up, meeting the eyes of those assembled. 8 hours later, American helicopters extracted personnel 5 kilometers from our position, personnel involved in the unauthorized Operation Kingmaker that we had inadvertently documented. The room remained utterly silent as Mercer continued his account, describing the desperate measures taken to save wounded teammates, the ultimate sacrifice of Petty Officer Okafor, and the systematic cover-up that followed his return. "I was declared dead against my will," he explained. "My identity erased, my testimony buried, my evidence confiscated. When it became clear that the chain of command had been compromised, I made the decision to disappear officially while continuing to gather evidence unofficially." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "I chose the role of janitor because it provided unrestricted access with minimal scrutiny. People see what they expect to see. No one expects to find a ghost mopping floors. This drew a few knowing nods from the intelligence officers present, a professional appreciation for effective tradecraft. For 12 years, I have watched Admiral Harding build his career on the foundation of my team's sacrifice, Mercer continued. I have maintained my cover while gathering evidence to correct the record. That mission ends today, with the truth finally acknowledged and my team properly honored. As he concluded his account, Admiral Carleton returned to the podium. Based on Commander Harlow's testimony and the declassified evidence, the Secretary of the Navy has ordered an immediate review of all decorations and commendations awarded to Admiral Harding related to Operation Blackwater. Additionally, the 4 men previously listed as missing in action will be officially recognized as killed in action and honored accordingly. He turned to Mercer. Commander Harlow, in recognition of your extraordinary service and sacrifice, I am authorized to reinstate you to active duty status with full rank and privileges, should you wish to return to service. Mercer considered this for a moment before responding. With respect, Admiral, I completed my mission. My service now is to honor my fallen brothers by telling their story. Carleton nodded in understanding. Then it is my privilege to inform you that all posthumous honors previously denied will be awarded, including the Navy Cross for your actions during Blackwater descent. Mercer accepted this with a simple nod. Though something in his eyes suggested such recognition held little importance compared to the vindication of his team. The briefing continued with operational details and next steps in the investigation, but the emotional core had been established. A wrong was being righted. Truth was replacing fiction. The dead would finally receive their due. As the session concluded, personnel filed out with subdued conversations, processing the revelations and their implications. Mercer found himself approached by Captain Jenkins and Lieutenant Riker Okafor. "There's someone who would like to speak with you," Jenkins said, gesturing toward the corridor where an older man in a wheelchair waited, his weathered face bearing the marks of hard years, but his eyes alert and focused. "Master Chief Ramirez," Mercer breathed, genuine shock breaking through his controlled demeanor. Jenkins nodded. "Found in a military hospital in Ethiopia 3 years ago. Severe traumatic brain injury, no identification. He's been in recovery at Walter Reed, memory returning in fragments. Your reappearance triggered something. He recognized your photo immediately." Mercer moved toward his former teammate with measured steps, as if approaching something fragile or dangerous. Ramirez looked up, eyes finding Mercer's with immediate recognition. "Ghost," he said, voice rough but clear. "Took you long enough." The facade of control crumbled as Mercer knelt beside the wheelchair, gripping Ramirez's offered hand. No words passed between them for several moments, none needed between men who had faced death together and separately lived with ghosts for 15 years. "Chen?" Ramirez finally asked. "Watson? Kelling?" Mercer shook his head once, the simple gesture conveying everything. Ramirez nodded, accepting but not surrendering to the grief. "You found the truth." "I found enough," Mercer replied. "The rest is coming." Their reunion continued more privately, while across the base, the machinery of justice and reconciliation began to turn. The investigation expanded, following threads that led from Harding to other officers involved in Operation Kingmaker. Documents were unsealed, witnesses located, testimonies recorded. The truth, suppressed for 15 years, emerged with the unstoppable force of water breaking through a dam. In the memorial hall, workers carefully removed the false plaques under the supervision of Commander Ellis. In their place would go new memorials, accurate in their accounting of sacrifice and service. The central plaque dedicated to Harding's fictional heroism was the first to be taken down, Mercer's janitor shirt still draped across its face like a shroud for a disgraced legacy. 3 days later, as the investigation continued to unfold, Mercer Harlow stood alone in the hangar where his journey back from the dead had begun. The space was empty now, chairs and podium removed, leaving only the vast concrete floor he had mopped for 12 years. He wore civilian clothes, simple and practical, no longer a commander nor a janitor, but something in between, a man in transition. Footsteps echoed across the hangar as Director Carmichael approached, a folder tucked under her arm. "The last of the paperwork," she explained, offering him the folder. "Your official reinstatement to living status, back pay authorization, and formal commendations for your team." Mercer accepted it with a nod. And Kingmaker? We've identified 12 officers involved, including General Maxwell and Admiral Peterson. Arrests are being made as we speak. She paused. It goes higher than we initially thought. The Secretary is personally overseeing the investigation now. It always goes higher, Mercer observed, his tone neither bitter nor surprised, simply factual. What will you do now? Carmichael asked. The Navy would welcome you back in any capacity you choose. Mercer looked around the hangar, seeing not the empty space, but the years spent there, watching, waiting, planning. I've been a ghost for 15 years. I need to learn how to live again first. Carmichael nodded in understanding. The offer remains open. Whenever you're ready. After she departed, Mercer remained in the hangar, moving across the floor with the same methodical pattern he had used when mopping. Muscle memory, hard to break even now. Near the back wall, he paused at a small mark on the concrete, invisible to anyone who hadn't spent years studying every inch of this space. He knelt, running his finger over the tiny carved initials. JH. His private marker, made on his first day as the janitor, a reminder of who he really was when the disguise threatened to become reality. The sound of the door opening again drew his attention. Lieutenant Riker Okafor entered, now in civilian clothes as well, having taken emergency leave to process the revelations about his father's death. Commander, Riker greeted him, approaching with respectful caution. They told me I might find you here. Mercer rose to face him. Just Harlow now, or James. I'm a civilian again. Riker nodded. I wanted to thank you for what you did for my father and for bringing the truth home like you promised him. Your father was the real hero of Blackwater, Mercer replied. What I did took time. What he did took extraordinary courage in the moment. I have his recordings now, Riker said. His last testimony about what happened. He spoke about you, about your leadership. He hesitated. He said Ghost Reaper was the finest officer he'd ever served with, that if anyone could bring the truth to light, it would be you. Emotion flickered across Mercer's face, quickly controlled, but genuine. I wish I could have brought him home. You did, Riker said simply. You brought his story home, his truth. That matters. They stood in silence for a moment before Riker continued. I'm returning to my unit next week. With your permission, I'd like to tell them about Blackwater, the real operation, not the fiction we've been taught. It's not classified anymore, Mercer observed. Tell whoever needs to hear it. Riker straightened slightly. There's something else? My team is being deployed to recover suspected remains of missing servicemen in North Africa. Based on intelligence from Ramirez, they think they've located one of your men. Hope and dread crossed Mercer's face in equal measure. Who? Kelling. They found equipment with his tags in a village near the Ethiopia-Sudan border. Mercer absorbed this, the possibility that another ghost might find rest. When do you leave? Wednesday, Riker replied, then hesitated before adding, we could use someone who knows what to look for, someone who knew Kelling. The invitation hung in the air between them, delicately offered but weighted with significance. Mercer turned, looking around the hangar one final time, seeing the path that had led him here and the possibilities that lay ahead. I'll need a few days to settle some things, he said finally. Riker nodded, understanding the acceptance in those words. We'll be ready when you are, Commander. As they walked together toward the exit, Ensign Calloway appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. Commander, Lieutenant, you need to see this. She led them quickly to the operations center where personnel were gathered around monitors displaying breaking news coverage. Admiral Harding's face filled the screens, speaking at what appeared to be a hastily arranged press conference outside the base gates. These allegations are not only false, but represent a coordinated attempt to discredit my service record, he was saying, voice steady with practiced authority. The man claiming to be Commander Harlow is an imposter, likely part of a foreign intelligence operation designed to access classified naval information. Mercer watched impassively as Harding continued to spin his counter-narrative, portraying himself as the victim of a conspiracy. The performance was skilled, leveraging his years of public credibility against the still-emerging truth. He won't succeed, Calloway stated with certainty. We have the evidence, we have the DNA, we have Ramirez. It's not about succeeding, Mercer replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. It's about creating enough doubt to avoid full accountability. He's playing for a reduced sentence, a chance at partial redemption in the historical record. Commander Ellis approached, tablet in hand. Director Carmichael is moving up the official press briefing to counter this. We need you there, Commander. Mercer considered this, weighing his natural inclination for shadows against the need for truth in the light. Not as Commander Harlow, he decided. That man died 15 years ago on paper. I'll speak as James Harlow, the sole survivor of Ghost Team and witness to what really happened. Ellis nodded in understanding. 20 minutes, main briefing room. The world press is waiting. As preparations accelerated around them, Riker turned to Mercer with quiet intensity. Are you ready for this? Once you step in front of those cameras, there's no going back to anonymity. Mercer's eyes found Harding on the screen one last time before it was switched off. I gave up anonymity the moment I set down my mop in that hangar. Now it's time to finish what I started. The briefing room filled beyond capacity with journalists, military personnel, and government representatives. Camera lights created artificial daylight in the crowded space. All lenses focused on the podium, where Director Carmichael stood, flanked by Admiral Carlton and Captain Jenkins. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Carmichael began, her voice carrying natural authority. We are here to address serious allegations regarding Operation Blackwater Descent and subsequent events. Before I take questions, I would like to introduce the man at the center of this situation. She gestured to the side door, which opened to admit James Harlow. He wore a simple dark suit. The first time in 15 years, he had appeared as neither a SEAL nor a janitor. The room erupted in flashes and shouted questions as he made his way to the podium. When he spoke, his voice was clear and unwavering, carrying to every corner of the room without theatrical projection. My name is James Harlow. 15 years ago, I led a 6-man SEAL team on Operation Blackwater Descent. I was subsequently declared killed in action against my will and without my knowledge, while evidence of what truly happened was systematically suppressed. The room fell silent as he continued, laying out the facts with the same precision he had used in the military briefing, but now for public consumption. He explained his decision to disappear rather than fight a corrupted system, his years gathering evidence while working as a janitor, and his eventual decision to reveal himself when Harding began cementing his false narrative into historical record. I did not choose to become a ghost, Harlow stated. That choice was made for me when my identity and my mission were erased. But I did choose when to return, because my team deserved better than to have their sacrifice built on lies. Questions came rapid fire after his statement, journalists competing for details of the extraordinary story. Harlow answered with measured responses, neither embellishing nor minimizing, presenting truth as the ultimate vindication. When asked about Admiral Harding's counter-allegations, Harlow's response was simple. DNA doesn't lie, evidence doesn't lie, and the men who died deserved better than lies. The press conference continued, but the narrative had been decisively shifted. The ghost had stepped fully into the light, and in doing so, had brought 15 years of darkness into the open with him. Days later, as the story continued to dominate headlines and the investigation expanded further up the chain of command, James Harlow stood at Arlington National Cemetery before the grave that bore his name. The marker would be removed soon, part of the process of officially restoring his living status. But for now, it served as a tangible reminder of the life that had been taken from him, not by enemy action, but by those he had served alongside. He placed a single coin on the headstone, an old military tradition. This one was special, a challenge coin from Ghost Team that he had carried through 15 years of waiting. As he stepped back, he became aware of others gathering nearby. Former SEALs in civilian clothes, men who had heard the story and come to pay respects to one of their own who had found his way home. Among them stood Ramirez in his wheelchair, Riker Okafor representing his father's legacy, Ensign Calloway honoring her mother's quest for truth, and Captain Jenkins, the man who had never stopped looking. They formed a loose, semicircle, not intruding on Harlow's moment, but offering silent witness to its significance. Harlow turned from his own grave to face them, no longer a ghost or a janitor, or even a commander, but simply a warrior who had completed his final mission. The mission his teammates had entrusted to him 15 years ago, when extraction had been denied, but determination had never wavered. As he joined the circle of those who understood what had been lost and what had been reclaimed, James Harlow stood straight-backed and clear-eyed, a man no longer invisible, a man who had reminded the world that even ghosts leave footprints if you know where to look. Do you believe in second chances? In the power of showing up when it matters most, even after years have passed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for truth when staying hidden would have been easier? These stories of moral courage remind us that integrity isn't about who's watching, but about who we choose to be when facing our own reflection. Subscribe for more stories that explore the hidden depths of human resilience and redemption.